Hi, welcome to Edward Box Guitar Tuition. So this is only the second and one of these I've done, Classic Album Inspection, and on this day, January the 6th, in 1981, this album was released, The Wild, the Willing and the Innocent by UFO. So this was their second album with Paul Tonka Chapman on guitar. So basically, tail end of 1978, I think October, Michael Schenker plays his last show with the band. The Strange in the Night album is mixed, I think it comes out 79. This kind of puts UFO stock up in the UK, but they're sort of levelling off in America at this time for various reasons. And then they released a No Place to Run album virtually a year to the day from this one. So in actual fact, No Place to Run is one of the first rock albums in the era of the new album to come out in January 1980. But it's not a great record, only a few really good tunes. Production's lacking by George Martin. So the band's got a little bit to prove. Here. After this, Paul Raymond, their classic keyboard player, will leave from the classic keyboard rhythm guitarist from the classic lineup. So for this album, they get in Neil Carter on guitar, keyboards and saxophone. So you have Andy Parker on drums, Pete Way on bass, Neil Carter, keyboards, rhythm guitar, saxophone, Paul Chapman and on guitar and Phil Mogg on vocals. So in a short space of time, the classic lineup of UFO has been disbanded. So what's this album like? I'm saying classic album inspection. I think there'd be debate whether it's a classic. It's not at the level of UFO's Obsession or Lights Out albums, but I do think it's not only the best of their Tonka Chapman era. It's probably the last really consistent album they did. People will disagree with that. There is some good Vinnie Moore ones. You Are Here, Walk on Water, their comeback album Michael Schenker had some really good stuff on. But this feels like a record. It feels like the band's worked hard and they've got something to prove, and it's one of the good albums, and an abundance of good and interesting albums in 1981 that don't, although they don't quite have the impact of their 1980, the albums that came out the year before for various bands. They find bands, hitting a stride. So this is recorded at Air Studios, which is the big studio in London. There's Wessex Sound Studios and Utopia Studios, and a couple of other ones, I think. But I think what's significant about this, the band produced it themselves. I think it was engineered by a guy called Steve Churchyard. Yeah, Steve Churchyard, Gary Edwards, Jeremy Green were the engineers, but Paul Chapman said Steve Churchyard was the main one he worked with. It was very easy going. So basically the sound of the album, it's got a very open, sort of big, boxy drum sound. I'm not referring to myself there. So UFO on the Obsession album kind of cultivated this Bonham-esque sound. And this has kind of got a similar sort of feel to it. Bass bottom end's nice and fat, and Paul Chapman has a really kind of thick, distorted sound. The double tracking's tight. The tune is nice. There's a nice amount of gain on it. So it's quite a heavy record. Probably UFO's at times one of the heaviest sounding albums up to that point. Phil Mogg's in fine form. His lyrics are recalling Bruce Springsteen quite a bit. He's getting quite influenced by Bruce Springsteen at this time. So tracks like Long Gone, Wild, the Willing and the Innocent, Making Moves, Lonely Heart, tracks like that, and the use of saxophone as well on the track Lonely Heart, they kind of capture that Springsteen and esque and E Street vibe with a few of the tunes, just a little bit of influence. So the opening tracks, Change. She's written by Pete Way and Phil Mogg. I'm just looking on my screen there. So this is a good solid rocker. It's a good opener. It's not the best track on the album, but 3 minutes 24 seconds. Doesn't waste any time. I think on this album what comes across is the choruses are all distinct and stand out as choruses. There's no sort of pussyfooting around. Here's the chorus. Arrangements are tight. So good opener. And it's track 2. This is the first really great track on the album. This is Long Gone. So Paul Chapman co-writes this with Phil Mogg. It's really good. So what's interesting about this track, really good lyrics, is it has a 7/8 bridge. So the bridge section goes into 7/8 time before the chorus, which is double tracked by Phil Mogg quite distinctively. So they didn't always do that, double track vocals, UFO. What's really good about this track, it starts off with a really quiet intro with some strings and a lovely Paul Chapman guitar part. I think it breaks back down to that with some strings after the solo. But the end section kind of goes into the odd time bit in 7/8 and has like a superb orchestration. Now, I'm not sure who did that. Now, it doesn't tell me down here. Paul Buckmaster, orchestral arrangements and orchestral conductor, apologies. So this guy does a great job, and then I suppose if I was looking for a comparison, it reminds me of the end of Magical Mystery Tour by the Beatles. You know, it kind of, you have the track and then it breaks down into something different at the end with an orchestral arrangement. And a little motif appears in this orchestral arrangement that signifies the sort of the riff of the next track, which is The Wild, the Willing and the Innocent. This is a good track. It's Chapman and Mogg again, making a good writing team here. It's got an interesting backing vocal on the chorus on this. Obviously a different singer to Phil Mogg, and that's the first time you've probably heard that in this band. Maybe Neil Carter did this, I'm not sure. I don't think this track's great, but it's good. Again, it's a good track, it's solid. And the orchestral arrangements on this again work really well. Something UFO did brilliantly, bringing in violins and so forth. And side one of the original vinyl finished on It's Killing Me. This is Pete Way and Phil Mogg. Nice sort of reflective verses on this. Trying to think who this kind of reminds me of a bit. It's kind of got a Thin Lizzy vibe in places. I don't know why I'm saying that, but just sort of what I thought of. But it's kind of, you can hear it's built off the bass. And you know, it's a good track again, sort of a 6 out of 10 track. So I'd say side one on this album, Long Gone was a standout cut, but the other tracks were good. If you were buying it at the time, you might be like, oh, you know, it's pretty good, I love track 2. Track side 2, apologies, is the really strong side. It really hits its stride here. Chapman and Mogg turn up again, just writing the first track, Making Moves. This is a bit of a classic really, along the Long Gone. They played this on the last time I saw them with Vinnie Moore. It's got a great riff, again the distortion on the guitar sounds top, drums are massive, everything sounds open. Like I said, when the band's done a really good job of producing themselves, they obviously know how they want the sound and they've worked well with the engineers to achieve that across different studios. It's got a really good solo in it. With Paul Chapman, this is his best performance as the guitarist in UFOs, no doubt. For me, he'd never be the level of a guy like Michael Schenk, who's like one of the absolute greatest players of his day. But Chapman gives a very solid account here. The solos fit, and if you can take it on its own merit, it's the UFO album with a different guitarist. You know, it's really good. So Making Moves has got a really good arrangement. It's 4:43. All the tracks up to here, apart from Long Gone, have all been under 5 minutes. So they're tight arrangements, but stretching out as well. Next track's Chapman Way, Mogg writing, it's Lonely Heart. So what's interesting about this, it's got a breakdown in the middle with piano, and he uses saxophone, so Neil Carter played that. Now Pete Way didn't like this at all. He didn't like the introduction of saxophone. I think it works pretty well. It suits the band. Thin Lizzy had done that before. And the piano part, the keyboard part that Neil Carter comes up with is really good. And he's in the classic UFO tradition, although John Sloman does play some keyboards on this here, Ozzy and Uriah Heep Frame, just checking. Yeah, keyboards is uncredited, so whether John Sloman plays on this, I'm not sure. It's a bit longer, this song, 5 minutes, but I think they made it onto Top of the Pops with this track. And it's a really good commercial hard rocker. It's the type of song UFO knew how to do better than any other band in this era. The next track was my first introduction to UFO. It Couldn't Get It Right. Some people aren't as keen on this. I love this track. I loved it as a kid. So my brother, I think it was my older brother, actually had the double single of this. You had a glossy sleeve and two 7-inch vinyls inside. I think there must have some live stuff on the other one. But it's got a really cool track, quite sort of Van Halen-ish actually, using sort of a riff on the D and G, on the G and B string with a D string pedalling. For guitarists, you'll know the type of riff with the sus4, the kind of Van Halen thing. Really like the bridge on this that builds into the chorus, and it's got a great drum groove. I think at the start it shows how Chapman's guitar sound is on this. You know, he hits a kind of open G5 power chord, and it's got a great sheen to it. Really good. It's got a good build-up climax of a guitar solo. I think it's really strong. So this is, you know, side 2 is very strong, this album. And then the track 8 is the last track, and the album finishes on not only the best track on the album, but I think the very best track that the Chapman era of UFO did. This is Professional Violence. It's right up there with UFO's classic ballads, you know. Nearly getting up there with Try Me. It's Chapman and Mogg write it. It's got lovely guitar, lovely piano arrangement, superb string arrangement. And then Paul Chapman does an outro solo that, you know, he really does pull out all the stops on this. It's got a great theme to it. There's some great little kind of, you know, more technical bits. And you know, he tries to match the sort of Schenker would do on a track like Try Me, and he comes pretty close in all truth. He's very, very good. It's got really good lyrics by Mogg, really, really sort of plaintive, you know. And you know, that finishes off the album. So a really solid release from UFO in 1981. This album didn't chart as well as No Place to Run. I think No Place to Run made, if it wasn't number 8, maybe it was number 11, and this made number 19. But that's not untypical. In 1981, the bands who'd had a bit of a bump in 1980 from the new album typically found their albums not charting as high in 81. This is the same as Saxon, Iron Maiden, all those bands. But I possibly suspect maybe some fans as well had been there with Schenker. They bought No Place to Run, but they didn't take to it, which is a shame, really, because this album, you know, it's well worth checking out. It's got good production. The performances are the best of this lineup, and the collection of songs are really good. If I was marking it out of 10, I think I'd give it 8.5. I think you got 5 top cuts, and then you got kind of 3 6 out of 10 tracks, and it's really consistent generally. And although not maybe a classic, although I'm calling classic album inspection, it's an album of interest. And in these little things I'm going to do, I will always cover albums that are interest that maybe don't have classic status, but you know, get us thinking about the rock that's gone down. Okay, hope you enjoyed that. Thanks so much. Cheers.